Welcome to the deep dive. This is the space where we take a stack of your sources, articles, research, your own notes, and we just extract the absolute most important nuggets of knowledge.
Yeah, it's basically a shortcut to being exceptionally well informed on a topic.
Exactly. And today, our mission is to really decode the science of intentional transformation. We're looking at a stack that's centered heavily around the book Be Your Future Self Now by Dr. Benjamin P. Hardy.
Right, alongside some really fascinating modern psychological research coming out of UCLA and Harvard.
Yeah, we're going to unpack why your brain actively fights change, how to break these hidden mental loops, and, well, how to start intentionally designing the person you actually want to become.
It's a huge topic.
It is. So to kick things off, let me ask you, the listener, a slightly mind-bending question. Do you think you are the exact same person you were 10 years ago?
Think about what you cared about back then.
Right. The people you spent time with, how you reacted to stress. Probably not, right? Most of us can easily look back and see this massive evolution in our identity. But here's the real question. Do you think you will be the exact same person 10 years from now?
That's the kicker.
Yeah, because if you're like most people, you just instinctively answered yes. And according to the science, you are completely spectacularly wrong.
Totally wrong. It's this really fascinating cognitive blind spot. I mean, we so readily acknowledge our past evolution, yet we operate under this weird assumption that our present self has finally, crossed the finish line of personal growth.
We think we're done.
Exactly. Dr. Daniel Gilbert, he's a psychologist at Harvard. He actually coined a term for this. He calls it the end of history illusion.
The end of history illusion. I love that.
Yeah, his research basically shows that human beings are works in progress that mistakenly think they're finished.
So I want to dig into the actual mechanism behind that because it feels so counterintuitive. Like, why would the brain recognize past change but suddenly just hit a brick wall when looking forward?
Well, it comes down to energy conservation.
Yeah.
And cognitive load. Because remembering who you were 10 years ago, that's just an active memory. The data is already stored.
Right. It's on the hard drive.
Exactly. But imagining who you will be 10 years from now, that requires active, complex construction in the brain. It takes a massive amount of neurological calories to simulate a radically different future.
So the brain just gets lazy.
Pretty much. The
Yeah.
brain takes a shortcut. It essentially just projects your current desires, your current values, your emotional states, just forward in a straight line.
Wow.
And the result is you falsely assume your current self is the final version. But the reality is your future self in 10 years, they're going to be a total stranger to you.
A total stranger. That concept ties directly into this massive shift happening in psychology right now. Because for the longest time, the cultural narrative was built around determinism.
Right, the classic Freudian idea.
Yeah, that your past trauma, your childhood, your history totally dictates your present reality.
Which is something modern psychology is aggressively pivoting away from. This is largely led by researchers like Dr. Martin Seligman and his theory of prospection.
Prospection, let's break that down.
So the core premise of prospection is that human beings are not primarily driven by the past. We are actually drawn forward by our vision of the future.
Hold forward.
Yes. Neuroscientists are increasingly viewing the human brain as a prediction machine. So your behavior in any given moment is actually guided toward the future scenario that you're most committed to, even if that commitment is completely subconscious.
Okay, which makes perfect sense on paper, but it immediately collides with how we actually behave in the real world, right?
Oh, for sure.
Because our sources bring up this hilarious and honestly painfully relatable analogy from the sitcom Seinfeld.
Oh, night guy and morning guy.
Yes. Night guy wants to stay up until 2 a.m., doom scrolling on his phone, binging shows, just soaking up all that cheap dopamine. Night guy is having a spectacular time.
He's living his best life.
Right. But he is actively sabotaging morning guy, who has to wake up at 6 a.m., exhausted, brain fogged, and just miserable. Night guy literally does not care about morning guy's suffering.
Not at all.
So why? Why are we wired to betray our future selves for a fleeting thrill today?
It's evolutionary mismatch. That's the culprit here. Dr. Hal Hirschfield at UCLA has spent his whole career studying this exact friction.
What did he find?
He points out that the human brain just did not evolve to think decades or even days ahead. I mean, hundreds of thousands of years ago, survival depended on immediate calorie acquisition and immediate threat avoidance.
We weren't worried about retirement.
Exactly. We were not neurologically optimized to care about cardiovascular health in 30 years or a 401k.
So our modern environment has essentially hijacked an ancient survival mechanism.
Yes. Every app, every snack food, it's all engineered to hit those immediate dopamine receptors. And our present self almost always surrenders to it.
He's just too tempting.
And Hirschfield's research actually mapped this using fMRI brain scans.
Oh, wow. What do the scans show?
So when people were asked to think about their current selves, specific regions in the medial prefrontal cortex lit up.
Okay.
When asked to think about a famous celebrity, those regions dimmed. But here's the major breakthrough. When they were asked to think about their future selves, their brain activity looked identical to when they were thinking about a stranger.
Wait, really? Identical to a stranger?
Yes, your brain literally does not recognize the future you as you.
That is wild. Your own brain views tomorrow's version of you as someone else's problem.
Which means the only way to override the night guy impulse is to start treating your future self like a completely different person. Specifically, like a dear friend whom you deeply love.
Okay, I like that framing.
Think about the psychology of affection. When you love a friend, giving up a Saturday morning to help them move furniture doesn't feel like an agonizing sacrifice.
Right, you're just helping a buddy out.
Exactly. It feels like a willing investment in a relationship you value. If you cultivate that level of deliberate empathy for your future self, doing them a favor, like going to the gym, saving money, putting the phone in another room at 10 p.m., it stops feeling like a chore. It transforms into an act of love.
That reframe completely changes the equation. But, I mean, even if you generate that empathy, the sources outline several hidden psychological threats that actively block this transformation.
Yeah, there are definitely traps.
Right. And instead of running through a laundry list, these threats seem to kind of cluster around a few major themes. The first big one is the gravity of the past. Specifically, how a lack of hope literally shuts down the biological machine.
Yeah. The work of Viktor Frankl illustrates this so vividly.
He was the psychiatrist who survived the concentration camps, right?
Yes, during World War II, Frankl observed this profound connection between the mind and the immune system. He noticed that the prisoners who lost hope for their future, the ones who could no longer construct any vision of life after the camps, they were the ones who perished the fastest. Without a future to pull you forward, the present loses its structural integrity. The mind surrenders, and the body just follows.
That's incredibly powerful. And Dr. Hardy builds on this by explaining that your past is never an objective reality. It is simply a meaning you are actively assigning in the present.
Exactly. Which brings us to the difference between operating in the gap versus the gain.
Right. If you view your past purely as a trauma that defines and restricts your current capabilities, you are trapped in the gap. The past is basically a cage.
But if you process those exact same experiences as the gain, the raw material that forged your resilience, your past becomes high-octane fuel for your future self.
It's all about how you frame it. Now, the second major theme holding people back is environmental determinism, especially when it's paired with the trap of urgent, avoidance-driven goals.
Yeah, the environment is huge. There's a psychological concept called the Pygmalion effect.
The Pygmalion effect.
It demonstrates that we naturally calibrate our behavior to match the expectations of our environment and the people around us.
We just adapt.
We are, at our core, adaptation machines. If you do not consciously design your physical and social environment, your environment will design you by default.
So it's basically like relying on sheer willpower when your pantry is fully stocked with heavily engineered 400-calorie snack bags.
That is a losing battle.
Yeah, if you don't shape your environment, it shapes you. You can have the most vivid vision of your future self imaginable, but if your physical space constantly triggers ancient dopamine loops, the environment wins every time.
Because you exhaust your cognitive load just saying no all day.
Right. And that cognitive exhaustion pushes us directly into setting avoidance-driven goals rather than approach-driven goals.
Yeah, that distinction is critical.
So an avoidance goal feels like I'm just running away from a bear in the woods rather than running toward a specific cabin. The bear dictates my entire direction, my pace, my stress levels. How does that constant state of retreat affect the brain's ability to plan?
Well, it traps you in the amygdala.
The fear center.
Exactly. An avoidance-driven goal is staying at a toxic job purely to avoid bankruptcy, or endlessly scrolling social media just to numb out the anxiety of a stressful day.
You're navigating by looking in the rearview mirror.
Trying not to hit the things you hate. But an approach-driven goal engages the prefrontal cortex. You are moving toward a positive future. You intrinsically desire studying a complex new skill to transition into a field that actually excites you.
Right. When you are disconnected from an approach-driven future, you just spend your life fighting tiny, urgent fires.
Never moving the needle on your actual potential.
Exactly. And that transitions perfectly into perhaps the most insidious threat mentioned in the sources, the fear of the arena, or what author Stephen Pressfield calls the shadow career.
Oh, the shadow career is fascinating.
I really want you, the listener, to absorb this concept because it is entirely about self-deception. Are you dedicating your life to a clear path that leads to a lesser goal?
The psychology behind the shadow career is deeply rooted in ego protection.
The example given in the sources is so good. It's someone whose ultimate, soul-deep dream is to voice animated feature films.
But putting themselves out there requires immense vulnerability.
Yeah, the fear of being told they aren't good enough is paralyzing. So what do? They settle for reading audiobooks for a genre they secretly despise.
Right.
Because they can go to family dinners and confidently say, oh, I work in voiceover. They get the societal validation, but they are hiding in a shadow career.
They constructed a safe, lesser goal to avoid the terror of pursuing what they actually want.
It's so common. So how do we break out of that shadow?
Breaking out requires moving past the threats and embracing the fundamental truths of future self-psychology. And the primary truth that shatters the shadow career is that vividness creates speed.
Vividness creates speed because a vague goal is neurologically useless.
Totally useless. The sources bring up Yuta Horigome, the Japanese skateboarder, to demonstrate this mechanism in action.
His trajectory is phenomenal.
Right. He went from being a moderately successful professional skater to winning the Olympic gold medal in just 4 years. And he didn't achieve that by setting a generic goal to practice harder.
No, he got incredibly specific.
He engaged in extreme, detailed craftsmanship of his future vision. He visualized highly specific, complex trick combinations that had never been landed in competition before.
He engineered the precise biomechanics needed to master them.
And he relentlessly aligned his daily routine to that hyper-specific future.
That's the reticular activating system at work, isn't it? When the vision is that vivid, your brain acts like a biological filter.
Yes. It suddenly notices the resources, the people, the opportunities that align with the goal while completely filtering out the noise and distractions.
And that hyperfocus requires you to accept a very uncomfortable reality, doesn't it? That failing as your future self actually accelerates growth far faster than succeeding as your current self.
It's called investing in loss. If your future self is operating at a level 10 times higher than your current capacity, attempting their habits today means you will inevitably fail initially.
You're going to fall on your face.
Yeah, but by doing that, you force your neuroplasticity into overdrive. Your brain and body are forced to adapt to a higher standard rather than just stagnating in the comfort of what you can already do perfectly.
Okay, I have to push back on this framework for a second.
Sure.
Because this idea of visualizing the Olympic gold and projecting this massive future self, it sounds incredibly inspiring. But how does this square with the modern consensus on habit building?
You mean like James Clear's work?
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of our sources explicitly references James Clear's Atomic Habits. And that book argues that massive goals are actually detrimental. It says you should focus entirely on tiny, incremental system changes.
Right.
So is this future self-psychology just like a glorified version of manifestation? Like, oh, if I visualize the mansion enough, the universe will just deliver it?
That is a critical distinction to make. The future self framework is emphatically not passive manifestation.
Okay.
Manifestation implies you visualize an outcome and just wait for reality to bend to your thoughts. This is about deliberate practice and reverse engineering human behavior.
So how does it fit with Atomic Habits?
Well, James Clear is absolutely right that your daily trajectory matters more than your current results. However, the science of expert performance, which is deliberate practice, actually opposes mindless habit execution.
How so? I mean, if I'm building a good habit, isn't the whole point that it becomes automatic?
Building atomic habits without a vivid, overarching vision of your future self is like having the world's most efficient engine inside a car that has no steering wheel.
Oh, wow.
They're making incredible time, but you might be driving straight into a ditch.
Right, you have no direction.
A habit, by definition, minimizes cognitive load. You do it without thinking. But deliberate practice requires immense cognitive load. It demands a highly specific, conscious, and difficult target. The future self approach requires you to act from the goal rather than toward the goal.
Acting from the goal instead of toward it. Break down the psychology of that shift for me.
It is entirely about identity. If you are acting toward a goal, your internal monologue is, I am trying to run a marathon.
Okay.
You are retaining the identity of your current non-running self and relying on willpower to stretch toward this distant objective. And willpower inevitably depletes.
Always does.
But if you act from the goal, your mindset instantly becomes, I'm a marathon runner in training. You adopt the identity of the future self right now.
So the decision is already made.
Exactly. When a marathon runner is offered heavily processed junk food days before a long run, they don't have to agonize over the decision or drain their willpower. Their established identity simply dictates that they don't eat it. The identity bypasses decision fatigue entirely.
That is brilliant. And that bridges us perfectly into the practical toolkit because we understand the evolutionary mismatch, the environmental traps, the neurological power of identity.
Right.
How do we actually apply this today? The sources synthesize this into a 7-step roadmap for transformation. And the first major milestone is establishing a contextual purpose.
Because so many people experience deep existential paralysis trying to figure out their grand lifelong purpose.
It's overwhelming.
It is.
Yeah.
The psychological advice here is to completely drop that pressure.
Yeah.
Because of the end of history illusion we talked about, we know your future self is going to evolve anyway.
Right. They're a stranger.
So instead, define your contextual purpose by selecting just 3 major priorities for the next 12 months.
Just 3.
This radically narrows your focus and provides immediate, actionable direction without the anxiety of mapping out the next 40 years of your life.
And once you have those 3 priorities, you have to shift from a state of trying to a state of knowing. It goes right back to that identity shift we just talked about.
Yeah, the classic example is the person tried to quit smoking.
Right. If someone offers them a cigarette and they reply, oh, no thanks, I'm trying to quit, they are neurologically doomed.
Yep. Their core identity is still smoker.
But if they decline by saying, no thanks, I am a former smoker, the transformation has already crystallized in their mind. They have moved from desiring to trying to simply knowing who they are.
And once that identity is locked in, you have to protect it. You do that by systemizing your environment and utilizing what the sources call the who, not how method.
The who, not how method.
Yeah. When faced with a massive obstacle, asking, how do I do this, severely limits the outcome to your current inadequate capabilities. Asking who can help me achieve this bypasses your limitations and leverages external expertise.
It's delegation.
Exactly. Concurrently, you must build an environment that forces positive action by adding friction to your bad habits.
Like the advice to take the batteries out of your television remote.
Yes. It sounds silly, but it works.
From a neurological perspective, you are intentionally disrupting the automatic dopamine loop. When you inevitably reach for the remote to just numb out, the friction of having to go find batteries forces your present self to pause.
And in that brief window of friction, your prefrontal cortex has a chance to step in, override the impulse, and remind you of your future self's goals.
It's basically a speed bump for your bad habit.
Exactly. You are systemizing your surroundings so that your cognitive load is preserved for deep work rather than wasted on resisting temptation.
Which leads to the final and honestly, perhaps most liberating practical rule.
Yeah.
Aggressively complete imperfect work.
Yes. Author Annie Dillard is quoted in the sources saying, a schedule is a net for catching days.
I love that quote.
If your 3 contextual priorities are not rigidly blocked off in your calendar, they are nothing more than fantasies.
And the rule of thumb here destroys the perfectionism that keeps us trapped in that shadow career we discussed.
Right.
Shipping 80% completion by your future self is infinitely more valuable than 100% perfection that your current self is just endlessly agonizing over.
Because perfectionism is rarely about high standards. It is almost always a mask for the fear of judgment.
Totally. Releasing imperfect work into the world is the only way to gather the real-world feedback necessary to actually trigger neuroplasticity and grow.
To pull all of these abstract concepts down to the ground, the sources offer a brilliantly simple exercise.
What is it?
They point to the massive YouTube creator, Mr. Beast.
Oh, yeah.
Early in his career, before he had any real success, he filmed a series of private videos, speaking directly to his future self. He clearly stated his metrics, his goals, and he locked in that emotional connection.
He treated his future self like a friend.
Exactly. The homework for anyone listening is to do exactly that. Write a detailed letter or record a quick video on your phone addressing your 10-year future self. Outline where you are, what you have achieved, and most importantly, how you feel.
It bridges that empathy gap. It takes the stranger in the fMRI scan and turns them into a flesh and blood friend that you actively want to support.
Precisely.
So, if we synthesize all of this, the Harvard research, the UCLA brain scans, Dr. Hardy's roadmap, what is the ultimate psychological truth we are walking away with?
The bedrock truth is this. You are actively creating your future self right now in this exact second, whether you're conscious of it or not.
Oh,
Every single micro decision you make today is either a cost that saddles your future self with debt, or it's an investment that compounds their wealth. And we are talking about wealth in terms of physical health, available time, deep relationships, and emotional resilience.
you can't pause the clock.
No, you cannot opt out of the process. Your only choice is whether your evolution will be a product of intentional design or just random environmental reaction.
The X-ray machine of our lives is not a static photograph, it's a moving picture. Every action is a vote for who you are becoming. Which leads me to a final thought I want you to mull over today. We've spent this entire deep dive talking about the incredible power of prospection, of constantly designing, predicting, and optimizing for the future. But if you become a master of living in the future, what happens when that 10-year mark actually arrives?
That's a great question.
If your brain is perpetually trained to look another decade ahead, do you lose the neurological capacity to actually inhabit the present moment?
That's a paradox.
It is. The ultimate challenge might not just be building a future self you are proud of, but ensuring that when that future self finally arrives, they still know how to sit still, breathe, and actually enjoy the life you worked so hard to build for them. Think about it. We'll see you on the next deep dive.